Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host. With us we have from the Working Families Party, Dhrupad Nag, who's going to talk with us about, have a conversation about the Working Families Party. And as it sounds, Working Families Party is a party that represents working families. Not too complicated. There are people that are certainly the moral consciousness of the electoral system in the United States of America. Largely here in Connecticut and in New York State, and there are some other states, but I'll let Dhrupad address that later. But quick shout out to Lindsay Farrell Brockman, who's the head of the Working Families Party in Connecticut, and she, as she described to me a couple of weeks ago, she's about 1 million weeks pregnant, and every woman will understand. Every woman who's given birth will understand what it's like to feel like you're 1 million weeks pregnant, particularly when you're looking at weather in the 90s during June. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dhrupad Nag. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, the Working Families Party. Tell me about the Working Families Party.
Yeah, so we were started about 20 years ago, initially in New York, and Connecticut, I think, was the second state that ended up being established. And kind of what the idea was that, as you said, we kind of needed like an institution that would push the Democratic Party to the left on, in times when they're not doing the right thing, in our opinion. So in Connecticut, our structure is a little bit different, and it kind of uniquely positions us to do the work that we're doing. So we are kind of half political party, like you said, independent progressive political party, and then we're also half issue advocacy organization, and C4. And those two things inform each other. So a lot of groups will do the electoral work, and then a lot of groups will just do the issue advocacy lobbying work. What we do is we understand that the electoral work feeds into the issue work, and the issue work then feeds back into the electoral work. So, for example, one of our priorities for the last couple of years has been paid family and medical leave. So when we, during session, we, run part of the campaign for paid family medical leave. We work on that either through lobbying or grassroots, knocking on doors, having forums, things of that nature. And then, when it's time for the election, when folks come to us for our endorsements, we make that a priority, and we ask them, would you vote for this if this came up? Would you support this? And when we're running our candidates, or when we're working with candidates that we've cross-endorsed, we make sure that issue is front and center in those campaigns, so that issue kind of remains important, and people are talking about it all over the state. And also, it's a very popular policy, and most of our policies are very popular. So it kind of, those two things very much inform each other, and that's kind of unique in the way politics is done in Connecticut.
Well, congratulations on being a big part of paid family sick leave passing in Connecticut. Explain a little more about what paid family sick leave is, what it accomplishes.
Yeah. So we actually have not passed paid family medical leave yet. What we did was in 2011, we're the first state to pass paid sick days, and that was a really and so that was one of Malloy at the time, who just got elected, was very good on that. However, because we were the first state at that time, that law now looks a lot more moderate compared to the laws that have come after in states all across the country.
So this is the sick leave rather than the paid family medical leave?
This is the sick leave bill, yeah.
Okay.
But the paid leave bill is a bill that we've been working on for about 4 years now at least, and it did not pass this year, unfortunately. It was SB 1, which is Senate Bill 1, which kind of means that it was like one of the top priorities for Senate President Marty Looney, and just the party on that side. The bill, the way it's kind of written, is that you would be able to take a period of up to 12 weeks off for things like maternity leave, paternity leave, someone in your family gets sick, mother, father, your kids, grandparent, or you yourself are sick. If you come down with something more chronic, like cancer or something of that nature, and you have to take some extended period of time off. And there's a few other things that are involved in there. But the idea is that, like, everyone should be able to take time off when they need it, especially when it's something as serious as like an illness or an illness in the family, or just being able to like spend time with your kid. I know that one of the things that we did this year on the campaign was we did this. There's a law in Connecticut that when I think a dog or a cat, when they're born, they're not allowed to be taken away from their mother for the first 8 weeks. It's actually illegal to do that. But in the state of Connecticut, that is not the case, right? Like if you give birth, I mean, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but a fair amount of women come back to work
Very
after 2
quickly,
weeks
yeah.
after giving birth. Beyond just the sort of like physical, labor that they had to go through in doing that, like the mental anguish of having to leave a kid that they just had, it's tremendous. I mean, we think, that's not right. And so the bill is completely in Connecticut, completely employee funded. So you would pay a very small payroll deduction every pay period into this account. It's not in the general fund. It's a separate account that would be housed somewhere within the government, probably the Department of Labor or something like that. And basically, whenever you need to take that leave, you'd kind of apply for it through some sort of mechanism. And then, you can't just take 8 weeks off because you want to. You have to have some sort of documentation. The doctor saying, oh, he broke his leg, he can't work for 3 weeks, or she's sick for this period of time, and this is how long it'll take. And then you can take that period of time off. The employee or the employer does not have to pay anything into this system. They will have to basically make sure that they don't fire the person, which I think is a fairly fair thing to expect. And yeah, I mean it's interesting because, like I said, it's very popular as far as just regular citizens go. We've done some polls. AARP has done polls. Both of them have polled at over 70%, 75% in Connecticut. But we just did a poll, or the campaign just did a poll for businesses, small businesses in Connecticut, and they polled at 77% approval for this as well.
Which was the bill that allows every employee in Connecticut 3 paid sick days per year? That was the one I was originally thinking of.
It's probably, that thing is paid sick days.
Paid sick days, which we didn't have until
2011, I believe.
Okay. Now, and of course, that's pretty important. If you go out to eat at a restaurant and you want to make sure that your wait staff, the person in the kitchen or the wait staff that's serving you, isn't sick. So that paid sick leave allowed them to take in the calendar year, and this is the average apparently in America for sick days taken by the average employee in a year is 3, which is where they came up with the number 3 sick days per year. So that way, that guarantees that you don't have someone, or helps guarantee that you don't have someone coming to work with an illness that's handing you your food, bringing you your food for the kitchen, preparing your food in the kitchen, someone that's taking care of you or a loved one in a nursing home. You have a better chance that that person's not going to come to work carrying an illness, which is going to get not just you sick, but you could pass on to somebody else, and you could literally have scores of hundreds of people get sick through being in the presence of someone that got sick, came to work sick, or got someone else sick at work, or someone that person got sick. It's just really, in fact, a no-brainer to allow people those 3 sick days per year.
Yeah, and so kind of what I was saying before is the threshold of that is actually very high comparatively to the laws that have passed since then. So I believe that this only applies to businesses that employ over 50 people.
Correct.
So, and there are special carve-outs for which industries actually do have to abide by these laws. And, at the time it was important because, like you said, we didn't have this, and there were a lot of folks who really needed something like this. But it doesn't go far enough, and it's certainly something that we have talked about with our allies, is trying to make it more inclusive, because we believe that these policies are super important, but they need to be able to be accessed by as large of a population as possibly can be for them to truly be effective and equitable. So that's something we certainly are working on, and will be working on, to sort of expand who accesses the paid sick days. And the lessons we learned a little bit from that is for paid sick leave, or paid family medical leave, we are trying to make it as accessible as possible. So, for example, in paid sick days, it's 50 or more. In the paid family medical leave. Right now, the bill that we've sort of been fighting for is pretty much any business with 2 or more. So almost any business would be covered under that,
Right.
and without many carve-outs. As much as we can prevent in the sort of sausage making process.
Now, how does that protect employees that say I broke my leg and I can't work in a restaurant carrying food to the table? How does that affect me? How does that protect me?
Take your time.
So like as an employee or employer?
As an employee, how does that help me being able to take? How would that help me being able to take, let's say, 8 weeks off for a broken leg?
So one of the kind of huge things that have happened in our economy is that we have a class of what we call precarious workers who are making just enough to get by. Sometimes not even that. In terms of the mortgage and childcare and healthcare and all of that. So when something happens that prevents them from being able to work, so if they get sick, they have some sort of surgery, they break their leg, and they're put in a position where they have to choose between getting that next paycheck or going to work sick, or it's something like a broken leg. You probably just couldn't. So this bill would essentially allow them to not have to choose between getting fired or staying home and allowing yourself to recuperate. We had a very powerful ally from West Haven who's been part of the campaign for a couple of years now, who was working at a home health care place in Brantford, I think, or somewhere in Connecticut.
A noble profession, certainly.
So important. One of the highest growing places of growth of employment in this country because of the baby boomers. But she had to get emergency surgery. She went in. She was told to be on bed rest for 2 weeks. She had taken 2 or 3 days off. They called her and basically were like, if you don't come in, we're going to fire you. So she does come in. She works for a couple days. Because she didn't take that rest, she had a complication and had to go back in for surgery. She again returned very shortly afterwards because they, same kind of deal. You have to be in or you're going to get fired. They cut her hours basically in retaliation for doing that, and eventually they did let her go. In her position, she was at a situation where knowing that she would be putting herself in harm's way, she went back to work because she was afraid of losing her house. It was that sort of like crisis level at that point. And I don't think that's an extraordinary story. I think that's a story of so many workers across Connecticut and across the country and things like this, particularly for people who are more low-income workers, people who are working wage jobs, which disproportionately sort of affects communities of color. This would be could be transformative in a lot of people's lives. People do have this benefit, but they tend to be more upper middle class jobs that have a sense of security already.
Yeah, they have
salaried workers.
Some jobs you can get insurance protecting you against. I think the classic example is the Aflac duck that sells you insurance that you pay a small amount out of each paycheck that protects you if you have to miss work. Well, that's all well and good if you're making enough money so you have enough additional to pay the duck to cover you. And if you can't pay the duck, then sorry.
Yeah, and so so that you're talking about private insurance, and for us it's really important that this is a government-run program because it's way more expensive to do something like that through a private insurance because they have to make margins on that. So we last year we passed a bill that made this study. Then there's an actuarial study done by an organization that does this work, and they found that given the average of how many times people would take something like this. They found that it would only be 0.5% from each payroll. That would be the deduction, right? So if you're getting something like from Aflac or something, that's going to be a substantially higher amount of money taken away. And so, and some people do bring up, it's like, oh, but would people want to do that? And the conversation that we've had all across this country, we go out knocking doors, most of the year, and people, particularly people who are on the more lower income, more precarious group of people, are like, I would absolutely be willing to do that because it could mean losing my house or seeing a family member just die because I couldn't take care of them.
Yeah, these are folks that really do in fact pinch every penny and make sure.
Absolutely.
So this is a great opportunity to take the pressure off them, to not have to go every day worrying about losing their job over an injury and having their whole life turned upside down.
And it's not just about economics, right? Like, this is also just a matter of values and what are the values that we want to embody in our society, right? Do we want people to, make that decision between like making their next paycheck and like living an unhealthy life, or do something that adds extra stress to their lives? I think that we have to think about the dignity of the worker, and a lot of the time these sort of policies do affirm that we value our workers and we value our citizens, right? I mean, it's so many of the new jobs have come back are these jobs that don't really offer benefits, right? And this is a way for the state to kind of be like, we want to be able to offer you an opportunity to have some dignity and do the things that you need to do. I mean, people want to work, right? People want to be part of this economy and give back and make enough money so they can live like a good, fruitful life and have a good life for their family, right? So, I mean, I think in a lot of ways this should be a no-brainer, and unfortunately it hasn't been.
It's the right, just, and moral thing to do. I mean, I think everybody, if you think of it in those terms, whether someone's religious or whether they're not religious, they still have values, and our value system tells us that would be the right, just, and moral thing to do.
Yeah, and beyond just, I've talked a lot about like kind of low-income workers. The other group of people that we in Connecticut kind of have to do a better job of keeping our millennials, our younger workers who, we have a good set of universities in Connecticut. We do have a pretty good public school system in at least parts of the state. And what happens a lot of time, I'm pretty young, most of my friends have left the state by now. By the time they've out of college, a couple of years, they've moved to the big cities around us. And what are those places, right? They're places like New York, which just passed a paid family medical leave bill. Massachusetts is very close to it. New Jersey passed one. Rhode Island passed one. I mean, we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage by all of these states around us. I mean, if you are looking for a job, right, and you can get basically the same job in Connecticut versus New York versus, not even in the city, but just somewhere in those states, Rhode Island, what would you do? I mean, if you have an option of paid leave, that is such a huge benefit that you just take that, right? Over, just staying here without that policy.
And kudos to our politicians.
Oh, you mean public servants?
Oh, you mean public servants? Thank you. Yeah, public servants who have the nerve and have the fortitude and have the moral certitude to back these things, to work for their constituents.
Absolutely.
To accomplish those goals and get good bills passed. Even if it hurts them in the short run, it helps everyone. We, the citizens of Connecticut or the United States of America, it helps us in the long run.
Yeah, and I would actually say, too, that there is a sort of the frame, the narrative that these sort of ideas come under is that, it somehow would hurt these, politicians, but in fact, I don't, public servants.
Oh, you mean public servants? I'll step in on that one.
It's called chutzpah!
Okay.
I just don't think that's the case. I mean, things like minimum wage, things like paid family medical leave, closing the carriage interest loophole, they are polling very high. I would say regardless of party, if you push these things, folks will reward you because they know it's the right thing. It directly affects their lives. Yep. They see that in a very direct way, and I think that the sort of narrative has been pushed for a very long time in the direction of conservatism and small government and all that, but we don't see that on the street when we talk to people, and I think that is changing, right? I mean, this is not America, but in England, right, we just had the Labour Party just kind of pull off a pretty miraculous victory of sorts, and a lot of that had to do with just them pushing very simple but transformative policies that people immediately connected with. And I don't think that is something specific to them. I think that's something that we very well could see in America and in Connecticut soon, for sure.
People in England, I guess they pushed aside the politics of fear that Theresa May has been promoting and was reinforced in her mind's eye by some terrorist acts, although apparently Britain's been very successful in thwarting terrorist activities. And perhaps the reason why they have so many terrorist activities is because they don't have the civil liberties that we have here in the United States. Their system is basically you're guilty until proven innocent. So they've got a very right-wing focus, and this is why why the colonies broke away from Great Britain, is because Great Britain had these policies of, these legal policies of guilty until proven innocent, and why America is so great in protecting civil liberties. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why we don't have as many successful terrorist acts as a country like Great Britain. But what other issues is the Working Families Party working on?
Yeah.
What are you promoting?
So, I mean, I think there's two things. So we have issues that we, prioritize. So, like I said, minimum wage, paid leave, closing the carried interest loophole, and then sort of the immigration stuff. So, working on the Afford a Dream Act, gaining access to the institutional aid pot.
What was you mentioned the carried interest rate?
The carried interest loophole.
Carried interest loophole. What is that?
So what that is Connecticut, and Greenwich actually specifically, is home to the third most hedge funds in the world behind New York and London, which is pretty remarkable to a degree because we're just like a small New England state. But because of Greenwich's sort of location to Manhattan and that, the Wall Street, it kind of has lent itself to becoming that. And so one of the sort of like tax loopholes that the very wealthy and sort of like private equity owners and hedge fund managers have kind of found was they pay a much lower rate, tax rate, on what they call capital gains. So the idea is with capital gains, right, it's supposed to be like long-term assets, real estate, things of that nature, which there's some risk involved in that. And so because of that, they are kind of given like a lower tax rate, kind of building that into it. However, these money managers, these private equity guys, basically what they do is they are managing other people's money. So they have no real risk in there, right? They're not risking any of their own money. However,
some people question whether they're actually doing a tangible job.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an argument to be made, and they kind of have come back with the argument of sweat equity, which is very interesting for them to be.
Although they never sweat unless they go to the gym.
Yeah, and so the idea is that with
and even then they've got people that go with them and sweat for them when they're in the gym.
Yeah, but so the idea is that we have so many of these folks in the state, and what happens is they're paying a much lower tax, on this pot of money, right? And so basically what we're looking to do.
Oh.
Your kitty cat says someone is trying to call you. Kitty says hurry up and...
Hello? Oh. It's Basil Buddha-Cat, host of Basil Buddha-Cat Presents. With his, he calls us up and we have to remind our audience every show we tape. We have to. So what are you doing? What are you working on for your next show? Said, I'm not sure about the next show, but the shows that we just taped, we had a little tete-a-tete where Berkeley Breathed, who used to write the cartoon Bloom County, posted a fake letter, an obviously fake letter, on his Facebook page from Donald Trump's attorneys that was a cease and desist order. And of course, for you folks that aren't really skilled in law, a cease and desist order does two things. It tells someone to cease, and it tells somebody to desist. And so how did President Trump's attorneys respond when they saw this fake letter on Berkeley Breathed's Facebook page? Okay. They sent a letter. Apparently, they sent a letter to Berkeley Breathed, complaining that they wanted him to take that letter down because they thought it was a fake letter, when in fact Berkeley Breathed was quite clear about the fact it was a fake letter. So Trump was suing Berkeley Breathed, and get out. Basil's saying that Basil beat Trump to the post on that one by 2 weeks earlier. Basil was suing Trump and sent him a cease and desist letter, which actually asks you to do two things: cease and desist. Asking President, he calls him President Bump, to not to use Basil's face or his picture or his name in any way and asked him to cease and desist that. So wait a second now. You've got Bump suing Breathed. You've got Buddha Cat suing Bump. Who's gonna draw the circle on this one? Okay. He said that all he needs is for Breathed to sue Buddha Cat for something or other. And now we've got Buddha Cat, Breathed suing Buddha Cat, suing Bump, suing Breathed. And we've come full circle. Okay, we'll tell people to watch that. Thanks. Okay, let's go back to the conversation about what the hedge funds are allowed, how they're allowed to pay at a lower tax rate.
So yeah, I mean, basically this loophole exists, and it's a federal loophole, but because it affects us in a way that's very important. The tax receipts have dropped pretty precipitously in this last couple of years, and a lot of it has to do with these money managers kind of taking advantage of these loopholes. So what we have sort of worked together with, working on a compact with several states around us, that basically, when all of these states, which I believe is New York, New Jersey, and I believe Rhode Island is the other one, sign the compact, then all of these states will basically make a law that will allow them to make up that difference in receipts and taxes from these folks. And these are people who are amongst the wealthiest in the world, not just in Connecticut, in the world. I mean, some of these are millionaires and billionaires that are taking almost half a 19.6% cut on their taxes.
It sounds like that a very slight adjustment in that tax rate would do a lot towards eliminating Connecticut's budget deficit.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly would take. It would be a great boon to the budget.
We're going to come back. We're going to do another show tomorrow, Thursday, noon 30 on Comcast. Until then, I'm David Stevenson, Dhrupad Nag, my guest from the Working Families Party, and we shall see you tomorrow noon 30. Thanks for joining us.